we're going to talk about Azure DevOps and iterations, and I'm going to show you how to configure and set these up properly. So we have a brand new sandbox project. This is basically one I've created from scratch. We're going to go in the project settings. We're going to go to project configuration. This is really where you are setting up your iterations. And we're going to start by focusing on a single team oriented aspect of the product. We're not going to worry about multiple teams or anything like that. The approach would largely be the same. So out of the box, they give you a template with 3 default iterations in the product. They have no dates associated with them. Now, iteration dates are really important because that's how you're going to get a burn down chart in DevOps. Now, the right way to set this up, based on my opinion, is you want to make sure that as an organization that your development sprints are, 1, a fixed length of either 2 to 3 weeks in length, and 2, that you have them on a schedule. And that is really important when we start talking about product delivery plans. We're actually going to show sprints in that context. Forecasting, there's all these different factors that are so important to the setup. So we're going to assume Sandbox is the quote unquote project. We have DX7 Dev as the organization, and let's just assume Sandbox is the big piece of software that I'm building. We're going to start off by actually saying that the iteration 1, I'm actually going to call this sprint 1. So if I'm coming in here and I'm using DevOps for the first time, I'm going to go ahead and start at 1. And let's say it doesn't matter the date, but today is December 3rd. Whenever my sprint planning meeting is, that's going to be the sprint start date. And you want that to basically be typically a Monday. So that's going to be December 2nd, 2024. And if I'm doing 3-week sprints, I'm going to set the end date to December 20th. We're not going to worry about holidays. We're not going to worry about vacations or anything like that. We're going to go ahead and save and close that. Now that there's that date set, we're going to actually delete iteration 2 and iteration 3. Now this is safe because I don't have any work items in those, but we're going to basically then, you can see we can click on the sprint 1 and we can say new child or new. We're going to go new, and we're going to go ahead and say sprint 2. And we're going to set the next one after the 20th. So December 2nd to December 20th. So that would be the end of the sprint. The next one would be, you can see it's already highlighted on the 23rd. And when I plug that in, DevOps has some cool heuristic type logic. They are going to repeat the previous sprint's length. And so they've already automatically selected January 10th. So you're going to keep doing that, and you're going to build out all of your sprints typically for the year. So what I would normally do is we're starting on December, and I would just continually build these out. So we'll go sprint 3, so on and so forth. Sprint 4. You don't have to set them all up in advance, but I actually recommend that you do. And we're going to show you why. So the next thing I'm going to do is I like to organize these into the year. So I'm going to say 2024. And there's no start and end date on that. It doesn't matter. I guess I could probably set one. So if we wanted a burn down for 2024, I could go January 1st to and you can see it already did the 19th. We're going to go and extend that out to the 31st, 2024. And then we're going to drag our 2024 sprints in there. Now we have a little bit of overlap here from 2024 to 2025. That's okay. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually say 2025. And we're going to go January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025. Okay. And then I'm going to take my other sprints and push those in there. And I'm going to continually build out sprint 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many there are. Now, this is typically what you want to do. You don't have to have the year, but you do want to build out all your sprints. You want to keep the dates. You don't want to reuse the sprints and continually change the date. And the reason for that is not only are you going to lose your burn down chart, when you build it out this way, every work item that you develop stays in that sprint, and you maintain all your historical data, your burn down data, your time tracking, everything. It is super important. So we're going to visualize this real quick in an easier way before we actually create some items. We're actually going to go in here and we're going to create a delivery plan, and we're going to call this my product. You can name this whatever you want. We're going to pick our sandbox team, backlog. We're going to actually do all three. I'm going to show you why. We're going to do epics, features, and requirements, and using the CMMI process model template. So your item names may look a little bit different. You might have epics and user story, or epics, features, and user stories, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the important part about setting up all your sprints, which we actually skipped a step, we have to go back to project configuration and team configuration. And we do have to add those sprints to the team that has access to those. So in this case, we're going to do sprint 1, which is already on there. So we'll go ahead and do sprint 2. We'll go to sprint 3, sprint 4. So it's a little clunky how they've done that, but now we have those on there. I think that was all the sprints that we had set up for now. So now we're going to go back to our delivery plans. And so what happens is now on your delivery plan, you can see all of your sprints that you've planned for the year on your delivery plan. And so now as we create items, which we can do directly from the delivery plan, we can actually create an epic, and we could say some large feature module, right? And maybe that epic is going to span 3 sprints. Typically, it'd probably be a lot longer than that. And then let's say in that epic, we have a bunch of features. So let's say there's like a print button. Let's say we have a email button. Let's say there's a distribution list, right? These are all features. And then those features are going to be decomposed into even smaller items. And typically we're going to go in here and we're going to size these. And so we might say like, okay, effort, maybe this is 1 sprint. Email button, maybe that's also 1 sprint. Distribution list, maybe that's a bigger item. Maybe that's 2 sprints. These numbers are whatever you want them to be, but that's how I do that. Is the effort on feature level for me is I'm estimating at a high level the number of sprints, whereas the epic is just some large initiative that's going to span multiple quarters of the year typically. And then like, let's say distribution list is actually 2 sprints. We're going to drag that out. And now you can see how setting up your sprints the way we did is important for actually managing your epics, features, and even your requirements. Because down at the team level, when we have requirements, like let's say, let's actually tie these to the epic, for example. So we have, we're going to go to backlog. We're going to do this an easier way. You can just link them together. We're actually going to go up here and go to let's see, requirements, features, and mapping. And we're going to go ahead and take all 3 of these and map it to the epic. And what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're at the feature level. We're going to actually start building out some requirements. Like let's say for the print button, let's say there's, some domain modeling that we have to do. Let's say there's a post web API that we have to build. These would be enabler user stories. They're architectural in nature. And then let's say that we have to actually do the letter composition would be another item. And then let's say there's a scenario that we need to fulfill. So this is one thing I like about the CMMI process template. We have a scenario, and then we could say this is the actual user story. So we can say user should be able to print 1 or more letters, right? And so all those requirements make up the print button feature, and then those can be sized in story point values. So we can say like a 1 and a 1, maybe letter composition is like a 4, maybe the scenario, which is where we might do our black box testing, is something like a 2. And those are going to bubble up into the feature. Now, if we go back to the delivery plans for our product, now we can see that we have our not only our features, but our requirements. And now we do need to link the requirements up to the feature. which actually we did that through the backlog. What we need to do is display them on the plan. So we're going to go to settings, somewhere in the settings. So we're going to have overview, let's see, field criteria, markers fields. And there we go, show child rollup data. So we're going to save that. And so what that's going to do is now on our delivery plan, not only do we see our iterations blocked out, but now we're going to get the rollup where we can see the epic has 3 features and a total of 4 requirements underneath of it. And we're going to go ahead and zoom out of this plan a little bit, just enough where we could kind of see everything at a high level. Okay, so we'll zoom back in one more level because we want the numbers. There we go. And so now we can start basically future planning. We can basically say, based on our team's capacity, our velocity, now we can take these features and say, okay, well, we need a distribution list here. Maybe print button we're going to do in sprint 3, and then maybe email button will come later in sprint 4. And we can basically say, okay, well, for the print button, we need to do the domain modeling, right? That's going to all go into that sprint 3. And then there might be other requirements for each of these. And so maybe like distribution list, which now we can add items from the delivery plan. We can basically do some same things. Maybe there's some domain modeling. Maybe there's a architecture and design requirement. Maybe that's a bigger item to think through on how you're going to build that. And then maybe those are going to take up the bulk of that first sprint, right? Maybe these are big. Maybe just to do the domain model, maybe that's like an 8. Maybe architecture, maybe that's going to be like 16. So maybe sprint 1 is something like a prototyping sprint, and sprint 2 is where you might actually build some stuff. And so maybe we actually have the web GUI. Maybe we have some scenario, and so on and so forth. And even if you have a situation where a requirement, typically these should be things that you're completing within 1 to 3 business days. Requirements should be the small, finely grained tasks. And so, for example, on the domain model, you're going to have tasks like coding, testing, code review. Maybe there's multiple domain classes or domain entities that are going to be built, and you have a couple different developers on that project, or maybe it's one developer, but there's going to be tasks underneath of that requirement. There's situations where sometimes you don't break something down small enough and it does span multiple sprints. And so again, the way we've broken the iterations out in DevOps, you're going to actually be able to showcase that. So let's say, for instance, the domain model for the distribution list, we didn't get it all done in our first sprint. Well, we can actually showcase that by now dragging the requirement out into sprint 2. That's one way to do that. What's going to happen is it's actually going to move that requirement into sprint 2, but it's going to have a start date so you can capture when the work actually began. And doing it that way, because it moves it out of sprint 1 into sprint 2 when the sprint is over, the team is not going to get credit for closing that story point value. And then you would re-estimate it in the new sprint based on the remaining size. There's a couple different ways. I don't want to get into how you would deal with carryover from a philosophical point of view. We want to stick to this concept of managing iterations. But I wanted to show the importance of actually setting up all your iterations in DevOps so you can actually have them completely planned out for the whole year. Typically, if you're doing 3-week sprints, you'll have about 16 to 17 sprints per year off the top of my head. And this is a really great way to be able to plan in advance, whether you do it on a sprint by sprint basis, quarterly basis, monthly, annual, whatever your cadence for planning is. This is an absolutely vital way to do this. So we're also going to go ahead and zoom in one level more so we get those roll-ups showing. And it might be per item because we don't have the roll-up. Oh, we do have the roll-ups on the features. There we go. So we have print button is requirement 0 through 4. We can see the roll-up there. Okay. And what we don't see on here is there's no task backlog because tasks are not part of the portfolio management. So if we go into the sprint view and we actually go to, I think it was sprint 2, where we had some of that. So sprint 1 had the architecture. The way we're breaking this down, we can do a couple things. Like we can go into the sprint board and we can actually showcase on the cards the fields, and we can actually show, like, let's say the parent, and that's going to allow the team. Let's see if I did that for the right. No, not for tasks, so requirements. So let's do parent. Okay. And so now there's no parent for that. So let's go and add it. So we're going to add existing as the parent, and we're going to find our feature work item. That was the distribution list. Okay. Save that. Fresh. And so now we can see from the team's perspective in the sprint, we can see the portfolio level backlog item, which is the feature. And so even though this architecture card is, let's also add the size to that card. So we can see that's a 16. We know there are other items that would need to be completed to complete that feature. We would see them all on the sprint board. Now, if we go sprint 2, same thing, web UI, domain model, so on and so forth. We go sprint 3, where we had a little more linked together. So now we can see these are all related to the print button. And then the team can stack rank these based on the order that they need to be completed in. So typically your domain model would be first. Maybe we need to do the letter composition next, post API last, and then the scenario, maybe the UI work would be the absolute last. And that's the scenario where then we'd actually deliver the user story and the value, that incremental potential shippable unit of work. So you can break work down in a variety of ways. I'm not advising you to do it this way. In my opinion, this is a way to break it down where you can actually get a much more predictable velocity and burn down during your sprints, but you track the feature completion at a higher level, which is through the rollups. Now we can also go to the backlog, and because we've set the sprints up the way we have, we can also go to the requirement view, and we can actually turn off parents, and we can turn on forecasting. Okay. And so what this is going to do is once you learn your team's velocity, whether that's the default of 10 or whether I say that's 2, the forecasting tool is going to automatically show you which sprints that you are likely going to be able to fit a certain unit of work in. So based on a velocity of 2 and work that is not currently in progress, and you can actually toggle that off and on. So you can say in progress items on. None of these are in progress because they're in a proposed state. This is basically saying that, okay, the domain model is a 1. That's going to fit into sprint 2. Letter composition and the web UI, if we put a size on that, let's go ahead and put a 2, save that. So you can see how it updated the UI. So based on velocity 2, I can only fit and this is based on stack rank order, by the way. So if I reorganize these, then the forecasting will look a little bit different. So now you can see I moved the 1 upwards in the backlog, and now it put 2 story points in sprint 2. And then we basically have a 4 story point item. Let's move that down. So now we have, let's bump this up to 4. And now you can see it actually put 2 1s and a 2. So it put 4 story points in sprint 2. And then it actually did, because we didn't have anything smaller. So in sprint 3, it put a 2. And then sprint 4, it put the 4. And then beyond sprint 4, we don't have sprints 5, 6, and 7 defined. It put the other stories. And so you can use the forecasting view to help you stack rank your backlog, but also get an idea of, based on your velocity and everything, where those can go into sprints. Now, it doesn't assign them into sprints. That's where you're going to do that either through editing the item and changing the iteration field manually. But I typically like to assign everything to an iteration through the delivery plans if possible, or through the backlog. I will simply go in here and we will actually go into, turn off the selection here. We'll actually go into the planning panel on this right-hand side instead of mapping. And now we can see where we can actually say, okay, well, if these are sprint 2, let's go to map those to sprint 2. This is sprint 3. Let's go ahead and map it to sprint 3, sprint 4, and so on and so forth. And so you can use the forecasting tool combined with the planning tool with your sprints set up properly to easily move items where they need to go. And now that we've done that, we can go back to our delivery plan, and those changes will be reflected on the delivery plan. So if we scroll over, we'll be able to see everything we just moved now rolling up on our delivery plan. Okay. And so that is generally how you should be setting up your sprints and iterations in Azure DevOps. There's a lot more that we could show, but I'm going to end this topic there. And if you have any questions or comments or any areas that we need to explore further, let me know in the comments of the video down below. And as always, you're watching DX7 Dev, and we'll see you next time.